something in me just was like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. It wasn't like a show, or it was literally a feeling in my body that like made my hand raise. And that's when I gave my life to Jesus, and I have not looked back. And this August will be 7 years.
Hey, Kaylee, welcome to the happy hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you here because a lot of times when I interview people, it's like, oh, I know them or I know what they're doing and all this stuff. And I feel like I'm sitting down with a brand new friend having coffee, and yet the whole world gets to listen to our coffee date that we're about to have. So if that's okay with you, we'll let the whole world listen to it. I'm glad you're here. I'd love it if you introduce yourself to my listeners.
Yeah, my name is Kaylee Morgan. I work for an organization called Be the Bridge. When we met, I was the Youth and University Program Manager. However, I just recently shifted roles within Be the Bridge. I am now the Content Manager. And so I run all things social media, any communication between our organization and our followers or our people who are in our Be the Bridge groups. I manage all of that communication now.
Kaylee, that was like, we met like 5 weeks ago. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, in case someone is not familiar with Be the Bridge, we've had Latasha Morrison, the founder of Be the Bridge, on the podcast a handful of times. So I highly recommend you guys listen to those episodes when she's joined us. But for anybody new who's like, I don't even know what Be the Bridge is, I am a big supporter of Be the Bridge. And so will you tell us, what is Be the Bridge?
Yeah, we are a racial reconciliation organization. And so a lot of our work starts with conversations. Genuinely, that is even how our organization came about. It was Latasha gathering a group of her closest friends in Austin, Texas, and realizing that there was a problem. There was a bit of a racial turmoil in our country. And so she was very conflicted on what to do about it. And she really felt led of the Spirit to just invite a group of people over, watch a few movies, and literally just talk about it. And that grew substantially. As we all know, the world has been a little dicey when it comes to racial matters over the last few years. We actually turned 7 in June. It'll be the month that we're recording this, actually. Mm-hmm. We turned 7 as an organization. And so we just really are about promoting racial literacy. We find that oftentimes people don't want to have the conversation because they don't have the words. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our work goes to providing that language and that verbiage for people to engage in this conversation, to educate not only themselves, but their communities. And it's just like the ripple effect. You know, if you can just worry about what's in your little community, they'll go out to their communities and they'll go out to theirs. And it just hopefully will go across the world. I mean, we are a global organization. And so it all started with a simple conversation.
I love it so much. And I think one of the things that I'm always a little prideful about, I don't know if it's wrong or right, is that I was in that very first group with Latasha. And I remember meeting in downtown Austin at the African American Cultural Center. I think that it's not a museum, center maybe. And I would have said, Kaylee, that I thought I had a grip on racial issues. And more than that, I would have said I had an understanding, which is a very prideful thing to say as a white woman. But I would have said that I did. I mean, I had 3 Black children in my home. We lived on the east side of Austin. I just felt like this is going to be great. I can't wait to contribute to the conversation. And I abruptly realized that I needed to close my mouth and listen. And I will never forget some of those first meetings. In fact, one of the times, it was a mixed group. There were Black women, white women, Hispanic, Asian. Like Tasha did a really great job of helping us feel pretty cultured in that room. And I'll never forget one of the exercises that she had us do is everyone went around and shared about a time in their life that they felt that something happened to them because of their skin color, that they felt like a racist moment or they felt prejudice against them. And none of the white women had anything to say.
Hmm.
And all of the women of color, it felt as if they were picking from a plethora of moments that they wanted to share, maybe the least painful in a room of strangers, you know? And
Hmm.
that, I mean, I just got chills thinking about that again, because that was a profound moment for me. And you talk about this language that you guys are helping. That's what it was for me, is it not only gave me language, I had to sit with people and hear their stories, and it gave me more understanding than I ever could. And so I will just forever be a fan to Be the Bridge and Latasha and the way that her work has impacted me. So it's an honor to know you and to see the work that you get to do alongside of them. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, although we could for a long time. Go back and listen to those episodes with Latasha. We'll put them in the show notes if you want to hear more. But Kaylee, we're in the middle, almost towards the end, honestly, of our Encounter series. And it's a series we do every summer where we invite people on to tell us, what did it look like for you to meet Jesus? And when I met you a couple of weeks ago at a conference, you just randomly dropped a little nugget about when you got saved. And I was like, wait. I want to hear more about this. Would you share with me on my podcast? So here comes the coffee date that everyone's invited to. Kayla, I'd love for you to share, like, what was life growing up for you? Did you have faith as a young child? And then when did Jesus intersect your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up in a very, very small town in Missouri, like a very small farm town, really.
Okay.
Um, and no, I didn't. I didn't really grow up with a faith. My mom, she told us probably about Jesus maybe at some point in time, but in this very small town, it is the Midwest. We do claim the Bible Belt there. I don't know
Okay.
if we're legitimately the Bible Belt, but it feels like it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those areas where, like, if you stayed the night with somebody on a Saturday, you were strategic about it because you went to church with them on Sunday.
Okay.
And so you found out really quick who had the cool youth groups, and
Yep.
that's who you said yes to the sleepovers.
Got it.
And so I always say that I grew up with the idea of Jesus. Like, I knew about this guy, but I didn't know him specifically. And so growing up in this small town, a very really white town. Our high school had 800 students in it. And when I was in the high school, we had 8 Black students, including myself. And so that was the world that I grew up in, a very white Christian town with no real faith that I was walking in. I was always morally sound. I would say I was always a good kid, wasn't getting into trouble, but didn't have any rhyme or reason, really. And so I didn't actually meet Jesus until I was in college. And on top of that, I was a senior in college. And so it's funny, I just actually met up with my high school principal. We both moved to Florida in the same area. And so we actually got coffee, and she actually got to come see me preach not too long ago. And so it was really fun being able to see her. And she knew me my freshman year, and it wouldn't be 8 years later until I met Jesus. And so she has gotten to see really that whole transformative process. She's a believer. She would try to talk to me about Jesus. I maybe thought I was too cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just wasn't really having it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't until college that Jesus came and really changed my whole entire life, really.
I love that. And it is, for me as a mom raising kids who, hear about Jesus and know about Jesus, I hear a lot of people's stories of how college was such a transformative moment for them. And I see my kids going into college, and I just pray big things for them as well. I think I might have told you this when we met. I met Jesus in college as well. Grew up in a Christian home, would have said I was a Christian, no fruit in my life, acting a fool, did not look like a Christian. But I knew a lot about God and would have said, oh yeah, I choose to follow him. And I know Jesus died on the cross, and I just don't want to go to hell, whatever that was.
Right.
And so I love college life for kids because there's such a unique opportunity for them to meet Jesus. So you head off to university, and what were your college years like?
Yeah. So It's really funny. I was just laughing about it with my friends the other day, but I really went to college to run track. I don't know about anybody else. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Um, Graduating high school, I think I changed my major like 4 times.
Isn't
So
it
really,
crazy that we ask 18-year-olds to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their life?
yes, I was just talking to my youngest brother. Just graduated high school. He's 18, and he was like, "Kaylee, I really don't know." And I was like, "Hey, that's okay. I didn't figure it out till I was 25.
Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're good."
Yep.
And even then, there's some days where I'm like, I don't know.
I know. I know. I laugh that what I do today as a podcaster didn't exist when I was in college or high school. Like, it's just like there's things that are going to be invented that you don't even know about that could be your job for the rest of your life. It's great.
Yeah, I have 3 degrees. I don't use them. I don't use a single one of them.
I didn't know
don't
you
who
have
I was
3
trying to
degrees.
prove.
Look at you.
Yeah, I do. And I just got accepted into seminary. So I'm getting my master's.
Congrats.
All of just adding more.
I love it.
Telling them up.
Where are you going to
But
seminary?
Dallas Theological
Love
Seminary.
it. Love it.
Yes.
Okay. We got sidetracked. College.
Yes.
You go to run track.
College.
Tell me about that as well.
Yeah, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. Had options to kind of play basketball, play softball even, or run track in college. And I decided to go to the local university. So I stayed local. They gave me the most scholarship money. And so I said, absolutely, twist my arm, I'll be there.
Yep.
And so, I go to run track and field. And my freshman year, there was a teammate of mine that's very, very a big part of my story, actually. But I couldn't stand her. I wasn't one to not really like people, but this girl, she would say the same in this time frame.
You guys did not like each other.
We did not like each other. We had no business not liking each other. It's not like we did the same event in track or anything. We just had this weird tension beef. And that lasted a good 2.5 years into my track and field career. This girl that I could not stand. And I had to practice alongside her. And even though running and practicing and our sport is people's punishments, really. We are running and everyone does that for punishment. We're like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
And that normally bonds you with people, but I just, I don't even know how to explain it. I just could not stand her. And that lasts all the way up until my senior year of track and field. And I had been successful. I was a multiple All-American at this point. I was highly, highly considering running professionally. This was going to be my life. I was going to be a track and field athlete. Had management on deck for when I graduated, had endorsements ready to go, was legit successful at this. This was my whole identity, was being a track and field athlete. And then in this senior year, in the last semester of it, I lose my great aunt. I experience a death in my family, and the teammate who I could not stand also lost her sister. Same day. Their services were on the same day. We missed the same amount of practice. And because the Lord has jokes, this entire 4 years of my career, my locker was next to this girl that I could not stand because the Lord has a sense of humor. And so we get back to practice the very first day back after being gone. And our teammates had written these beautiful notes and put them all in our lockers. And it's very rare for you to be the only person in the locker room, let alone the only person with one other person. And it was just her and I. And we sat there and we were reading letters, and she was crying. And because I am not a horrible human being, I look over at her and I'm like, hey, are you okay? And she looks me dead in my eyes and goes, no. And I was like, oh, okay. Normally people just say yeah.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, great.
Now what?
Now I have to figure this out. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And it was like really awkward. Like I think I present that I'm super like good with people. And then I get in these moments where I'm like, I don't know words.
Yeah.
And so we like sit in this really awkward silence.
Mm.
And I'm like looking down because I don't want to look at her because I don't know what to do. And she's like sniffling, and she finally like looks up and it like catches my eye, right? So then we're making eye contact, and she goes, "Will you go to church with me on Sunday?" Out of nowhere. And because I'm super awkward and didn't know what to do, and she's like crying, I was like, sure. Right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't like her. She doesn't like me. Now I'm going to church with her on Sunday.
Wow.
And, you know, we fast forward to Sunday, and I think I had maybe shared this with you. I talk about often that God will put something familiar in front of us to remind us that he's there and that he's present.
Mm.
And it could be the littlest of things. And so I'm going to rewind a second. When I was in elementary school in our very small town, my younger brother and I have a brother who's 4 years younger than me. His name is Trayton. And Trayton and I used to walk to elementary school together. And we'd walk home. And so when I would get out of class, I would walk up to his teacher's door, say hello to his teacher. Hello, Mrs. Quaddy. That's what I would say every day. Pick him up, and we'd go home. And that was every day of my fifth grade career. Fast forward to Sunday. We go to this college age service, and I walk in, and the very first person that I see is Mrs. Quaddy. And so I like walk up to her and I'm like, "Hey, Mrs. Quaddy." And she gives me like this huge hug. Come to find out, her husband is the college age pastor at this church.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of connect again. I meet up with my teammate. We sit next to each other, and we listen to the service. And at the end, you know, he gave the like salvation call, like if anyone wants to accept Jesus. And something in me just was like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a show, or it was literally a feeling in my body that like made my hand raise. And that's when I gave my life to Jesus, and I have not looked back. And this August will be 7 years. It'll be 7 years that I've been a believer.
7 years, and be the bridge of 7 years. I mean, I just think that's really cool too. So you're at this service, and I think it's just, I remember you telling me this when we met about how you ended up going with the girl that you hated your entire college career. And isn't God just hilarious that all those years he knew, just wait, because in 2 years, you're going to be sitting next to her in church, knowing me for the very first time. So this happens. And, you know, growing up in the Bible Belt, knowing about Jesus, you have this experience, you have this moment. What did that look like the next day? What did it look like for you to say like, oh, okay, so like now I'm following Jesus? Like, what was it like with you and that friend? Like, what happened after this?
Yeah, so I ended up in a discipleship group. I gave my life to Jesus, ended up in my brother's first grade teacher's discipleship group. So now I'm going over to her house, and she's showing me pictures of my brother when that was her student. And we met every Wednesday. They would cook us dinner. I met with some other girls. Funnily enough, they were all Bible college students. So it's like all these Bible college students, and then me, who feels very not versed in the word, but had this hunger. I had a really, really deep hunger. And I remember being told to read Luke. Luke was the first book of the Bible that I read in its completion. That wasn't just like a verse here, a verse there. And then crazily enough, after I accepted Jesus, not too long after, I ended up tearing my labrum in my hip.
Oh, wow.
And so all of those track and field offers that I had an invitation to go to the trials I was supposed to be in the Rio Olympics. Um, Lost it all. Couldn't compete, had to have surgery. And all of the sudden, this identity that I had built up as a track and field athlete was gone. And so my first year of being a believer, I studied identity, my identity in Christ, because I only knew Kaylee, the athlete. I was Kaylee, the track star. I was on our college's commercials. I was on our billboards. I was like the local little celebrity track star. And that's what I knew. And so, funnily enough, shortly after I became a believer, all of that left. And I took a whole year. I mean, I had hip surgery. I was stuck in a bed for like months. And couldn't run, couldn't do any of my normal like outlets. And so I read the Bible and studied my identity and just developed this incredibly deep love for the word. So much so that I ended up moving to Dallas and became an intern at a church, maybe like 6 months or so. Like, I think in that time frame, like, I think a year and a half after I was a believer.
Yeah.
Ended up an intern at a church. And then even from there became a college age minister. Back at the same church that I met Jesus at.
Wow.
And got to do outreach to the college that I went to. And had a partnership with the track team and got to feed them and just talk to them about Jesus. And it really just, I always have said that my faith has been expedited. Everything I felt like happened so fast. I ended up preaching and teaching and writing about Jesus for other people and discipling people. And I mean, I think I was a college age minister. I was on my second year of being a Christian. Like, it makes no sense. But the Lord, I guess, had plans and needed it to be fast.
Fast track.
It kind of just,
What was your relationship like with your teammate after that?
Oh, yes. We became best friends after that.
Are you serious?
Yep. I was in her wedding. If/when I get married, she will be in mine. She, at one point in time, we both lived in New York at the same time. So that was super fun. But yeah, we are like super close. We talk still. We don't hate each other. That's for sure. But yeah, we became best of friends, and all of our other teammates were really, really confused when we came back that Monday. Super tight.
I think it's crazy the way that God uses regular things in our world often to bring us to him. And I also am like, so not the word I'm trying to think of, like, is how awesome. I can just think of awesome. Like, I'm sure there's a better word, that God would be not only just like this thing out there for you, but he'd be like your savior and your Lord and your friend when you went through one of probably the hardest times up until that moment in your life of losing everything in front of you. Did you have any moments where you were angry at God about that? I mean, you're a new believer, and I think that seasoned believers, like, and God can handle our anger. I don't think it's wrong to be angry at God, but what was that like for you with your relationship with him when everything was stripped from you just in a moment?
Oh yeah, I was super frustrated. I was like, look, if this is it, I don't want it.
Right.
Like, you can take it back. Like, you can take that back.
Yeah.
What was really nice though was that there was the frustration. Like, don't get me wrong. I was bedridden. You have a lot of time to think, and you have a lot of time to be mad and ask the Lord a lot of tough questions. But I also can say that growing up, I had teammates. I didn't necessarily have friends. So depending on the sport I was playing, depended on who I hung out with, who I was around. There was never a really like solid person that like was in every season with me until I became a Christian.
Wow.
And until I like learned what actual community is and what actually living life together is. I would say prior to that moment, I had what I call now convenient friendships. We have the same schedules. So naturally we're available at the same time. There's no questions about that. So because I had only had convenient friendships and I've had teammates, when my track career was over, I lost my track community. And so in another scenario without the Lord, I would have been, not only would my career have been taken away, but I would have lost all my friends at the same time. And so because I had known the Lord, I actually had a group of people to come alongside me. And so it's been that lesson comes, I think, in retrospect. I don't know that I necessarily had grasped that in the moment. I was aware of it because I was like, wow, these people aren't leaving my side. Like literally they're sitting next to the bed.
Yeah.
But I've just noticed that a lot. There is, I think perspective is key on a lot of those times when you are, whether you're dealing with a loss of career, a loss of just what you thought your life would look like, to losing a loved one, right? There's always that inkling of blaming God. But I think in a lot of those spaces, because we're so zoomed in, it's hard to see where God is still showing up. Where God showed up in that moment by surrounding me, allowing me to be saved before I lost my career. And allowing me to have a community in a time where I would be like, who even am I? He gave me a group of people who could speak into that and be like, you know, you weren't Kaylee, the track athlete. You were Kaylee who happened to do track. Like that's the reality of your situation. So yes, I was angry, but I can see the good of where God was in that transition in my life.
I love that you say the perspective is everything. And even hindsight is really, really great. And I think one of the things that I've learned walking with Jesus for the last, 20 something years is that when I notice that hindsight, and when you're acknowledging the hindsight that you're noticing, it is for me important that I kind of mark that and remember that, because I'm going to be in a situation again where I'm so in it, I'm so zoned in, like you say, so zoomed in, that it's hard to see what's happening around me. But it's in those moments that I can go, okay, I've been through something like this before, maybe different, maybe of this, da, da, da. And as I looked back on it, I was able to see God's hand all over it. It's okay, Jamie, I'm in the situation now. I'm going to trust that God's hand's over it, even if I can't see it. That's what that does for me, is like looking back and seeing that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of people don't mark those moments as much as they should.
Oh yeah. That is like one of my biggest teaching moments, is perspective and just remembering. Because in those moments when we're so frustrated, we have to remember who God is. And God's not out here trying to spite us.
Right.
He didn't want me to be sad about losing my career. I do think that it is a funny timing in which I meet him, and he became my identity. He took the thing that I was obsessed with, and he made sure that it was him that I was obsessed with, and that him I was looking on. But it set me up for so much. But yeah, I think perspective is key. So then when you are in those tough scenarios, like you said, you can remember the goodness of God. Be like, okay, in this moment, I am frustrated. Yes, I am angry, and that's okay. And he can take that. But let me zoom out and let me find the good in this scenario. Because there's a lot of times where you have to sift through the gunk to find the goodness, but it's there. Like I promise you, whatever it is that people are walking through, you can find at least one little golden nugget that is representative of the goodness of God.
I love it so much. I just was reading recently in Deuteronomy, and it was talking about like Deuteronomy 8, and it was talking about how remember what God has done for you. And he was talking to the Israelites as he took care of them in the desert, and remember what he's done for you. And it actually does say, like, remember the Lord your God, for it is him, he swore to you these things. And I think that's what we have to do often, is we have to say, like, okay, I'm going to remember what's happened so that it comes up again. It's so great. Kaylee, now walking with the Lord for 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
working with a ministry. Seems like you worked with lots of ministries in the past. What is your hope for college kids? I mean, you were saved in college. Lacey was on here earlier, Lacey Abercrombie. She was saved in college.
Yeah.
I was saved in college. I was just like, I told you already, I'm just like, college kids rock. What is your like hope for this generation that's in college right now?
Oh, yeah. I think this generation specifically in college, because we're looking at what Gen Z. Gen Z is in the
I
group
think
in
so.
college right now. And then Alpha is coming up behind them. This is such a, I could take this in two different ways, because I can like look at it in a justice bend and be like, oh yeah, this group is awesome. Like, I don't have any worries about whether or not the Be the Bridge mission is going to keep going. They're on it. But I also think that this generation is so hungry for the Lord, and even more so, like, legitimate truth. While all around them they're hearing, speak your truth, your truth. But what I see in this generation is a group of people looking after or striving after the truth, which is Jesus. And so I won't be surprised if the generations to come have many stories like ours, where they were saved in college and that they just have this hunger and desire. And my goal is that, my ultimate goal, again, as you know, when we met at this conference, I had mentioned that because I was a track and field athlete, that is the way the Lord teaches me like ministry concepts or even faith concepts. And it's funny because when I think about my hope for this generation, it actually is more so the responsibility of the generation above them, which would be millennials. Is that my hope is that the millennials pass the baton well. In a relay race, you could have the fastest runners imaginable, but if their handoffs are trash, they'll lose. And they will lose to a team who on paper they should never lose to. In track and field, on the relay teams, we spend 90% of our time working on handoffs and only 10% of the time actually working on our running form. And that's something that we don't, sometimes in the church I get worried that we don't transition well. And so my biggest hope, I believe this generation coming up is more than capable of keeping the charge going and keeping the fight going and really doing incredible work for the kingdom and for the world, quite frankly. My biggest concern actually is with the millennials, making sure that we transition this well and that we are setting up the next generation to take it over. I have all the faith in Gen Z. I have all the faith in Gen Alpha. I talk to them on the regular. It's my younger brothers. It's my friends' kids, right? It's my youth group students at my church that I'm running and leading. I'm engaged with this group all the time. And they have so much hate that's surrounding them. But I have no question on whether or not they're going to be awesome. My question is, are we going to allow them to be awesome? That's my biggest concern.
That's really good. And the analogy with the relay is understandable for everyone, and especially those of you that compete in track and field. And it can just, you talk about things going wrong. I mean, if that, third leg runs up on the fourth leg, you scratch them all up. You can't get the handoff right. The hand's there. You can't get in there. And if that fourth leg takes off too soon, then the third leg's having to struggle to get there. And it is really such like a how do we make a smooth transition? And it's a really good analogy. Kaylee, I'm grateful for the work that you're doing, Be the Bridge, and I'm thankful for the work you're doing in your church and throughout the world. So grateful for those lockers being put next to each other, for those notes arriving at the same time, for you heading into church, for the teacher there. I mean, just all the things that God put together in your life to show that he was after you, that he loved you, that he was coming for you. It's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. I would love to hear from you. What are you loving these days and what are you reading?
Oh, yeah. What am I loving these days? Oh, man. How about I start with what am I reading?
Okay, go for it.
This is going to be like stereotypical. She'll be like, oh, she's a Christian. But I am reading the Action Bible. It's like funny, but it's like a comic book Bible.
I think my boys have that. I think we have that here at our house.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. I recently was talking to a friend, and I'm so glad I'm reading it because, again, I was talking to a friend at church, and she was just like, I'm having such a hard time like engaging the word. It's just like not making like sense in a way, and I wish there was like a fun way to engage the word. And I had remembered prior that she told me she liked comic books, and I was like, actually, I have it right here. Again, I was leading our youth group and I was leading them in a lesson. And I was just like, they're not clicking. They're not engaging this. I need to switch things up. And I had happened to look at one of my students' phones and it was like a Marvel background. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, are you into comics? And she's like, yeah. And I felt like right then and there, the Lord was like, you're supposed to teach them out of the Action Bible. And so I personally bought all of my students an Action Bible.
Look at you.
We do lessons out of the Action Bible, and then I send them home to read whatever story we read in the Action Bible with their parents in the physical Bible.
That is brilliant.
And so they're like, first engagement is with me through this comic book. And then with the intentions of them going home and being in the actual written, like physical Bible. And so
I love that.
I happened to have one on me. And so I gave it to my friend. So yeah, that is what I'm reading right now. What am I loving right now? I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, home of the Tampa Bay Rays.
Okay.
It is Tampa Bay Rays. However, their stadium is in St. Petersburg, and I'm going to take that.
Okay.
And so I'm loving the Rays. I think I've been to 7 games already.
Wow, that's good.
3 games in a row, like 3 days in a row was at the Rays. My very first date with my boyfriend was at the Rays. Like I just am loving the Rays.
Okay.
I'm absolutely loving the Rays right now. And I'm loving Haagen-Dazs vanilla and almond ice cream bars. That's my go-to.
I love it.
Snack.
I love it so much. Well, I love that you love the Action Bible, and what a great idea to read that with your students. Great idea. Kaylee, I'm so grateful for you coming on and sharing your story, and I'm just cheering you on from Austin and everything you got going on, and love the work that you guys are doing, and wish you so much of the best as you head into back to school in the fall, and super excited for everything you've got going on.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I am so glad that God has connected us, and I look forward to chatting soon. I'm sure this is going to happen soon.
I am so certain that it will.